Welcome, my friends, to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news. New York Times reports that heat records broken around the world as the Earth warms fast. Quote, from north to south, temperatures are surging as greenhouse gases trap heat in the atmosphere and combine with the effects of from El Nino. The last 3 days were quite likely the hottest days in Earth's modern history, scientists said on Thursday, as an astonishing surge of heat across the globe continued to shatter temperature records from North America to the Antarctic. The spike comes as forecasters warn that the Earth could be entering a multi-year period of exceptional warmth, driven by two factors: continued emissions of heat-trapping gases, mainly caused by humans burning oil, gas, and coal, and the return of El Nino, a cyclical weather pattern. And I might add that we are burning more fossil fuels than ever before. We have gone into hyper gear here because of the war in Ukraine and other things going on and around the world that require the burning of fossil fuels in order for us to survive. And I would also add that we have entered a period of the solar maximum. Scientists have been tracking the solar cycle since 1755, and we're now entering the solar maximum cycle 25, which is expected to peak in 2024-25. We don't think of the weather in space, but our collective reliance on technology and space increases each year, and with it, it makes space weather ever increasing risk for us. Large scale coronal mass ejections can threaten our communication systems and power grids. As we enter the solar maximum, the probability of extreme space weather events increases, just as extreme weather events on Earth are increasing. I'm not even sure what to imagine will happen when the internet collapses and the cloud disappears after a massive CME. But I had an experience this week that gave me some insight. I fell. I was out doing my power walk. It was in the heat of the day, and without warning, I stumbled, crashed to the concrete, hit my head hard enough to start blood running down over my left eye. And here is where the insight came. 1 minute, everything was normal and I was moving. And the next moment, I was on the pavement, confused. I didn't understand how I had gotten from this to the sidewalk. I wasn't quite sure any longer where I was. It wasn't serious, nothing was broken, just bruises. But when it happened, our first thought was maybe I should go to the hospital and get checked out. Maybe something's broken. But that would require spending time with people who don't wear masks. And so now, when I think of healthcare, I have to consider, is it worth the risk? It was a trauma that reminded me of how fragile our existence actually is. 1 minute, everything is fine, and the next, you're flat on your face. 1 minute, you're living in Paradise, California, a wonderful green suburb, and the next minute, Paradise has turned into a dystopian hell. The Times article went on, the planet just experienced its warmest June ever recorded, with deadly heat waves scorching Texas, Mexico, and India. Off the coast of Antarctica, sea ice levels this year have plummeted to record lows. And in the North Atlantic, the ocean has been off the charts hot. Surface temperatures in May broke all previous records by an unusually large margin. This sharp jump in temperatures has unsettled climate scientists. Quote, it's so far out of line with what's been observed that it's hard to wrap your head around it, said Brian McNulty, a senior research scientist at the University of Miami. It doesn't seem real. And that seems to sum up things these days. It doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real because it isn't. The planet that we used to live on no longer exists. The planet we live on now is terrifyingly unpredictable. Well, my friends, today is the 5th day of the Hebrew month of Av, and Wednesday evening begins the 9th of Av, the most traumatic day in Jewish history. It was on this day in the year 586 BCE that the Babylonian emperor Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple, and on the same day in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the second temple. Many other tragedies occurred on this day, including the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition in World War I, which marked the beginning of the destruction of European Jewry. Before World War I, the heartland of Jewry was in Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. And those communities were entirely wiped out. It was like a massive fire that wiped out all the old growth. Judaism was 2,000 years old when the Romans destroyed the temple and brought the sacrificial system to an end. It resembled the destruction of an old growth forest. Yes, a whole new forest emerged, and now we have a golden age of Jewish cultural renaissance. But it reminds me of Job, who lost his family and his wife and his children. He survives, like so many Holocaust survivors, and raises a new family. But what has happened to our notion of justice? As I mentioned last week, I've begun reading Amitav Ghosh's The Nutmegs Curse. Nutmegs in the 17th century were extremely valuable. A handful of nutmegs could buy you a house. And they were only found in a few small islands called the Banda Islands in Indonesia. In 1609, the British East India Company set out to exterminate the Bandanese and replace them with slaves. Incendiary attacks figured prominently, for instance, in the Pequot Wars of 1636-38, which were fought between the English settlers in New England and the Pequot and Algonquin tribe of what is now Connecticut. The conflict has been described as, quote, the first deliberately genocidal war conducted by the English in North America. And it's suddenly began to put this together that around the world, in Indonesia and the Banda Islands, the East India Company was exterminating these native peoples in order to facilitate the modern colonial trade. The massacre at Mystic in Connecticut occurred in 1637, when a company of English soldiers and their allies used the cover of night to attack a fortified Pequot settlement while hundreds of people were asleep inside. The attack was directed by two soldiers who had both served as mercenaries for the Dutch, John Mason and John Underhill. John Mason led the attack, and it was he who had the idea of burning down the village with a torch, which was a technique that had been developed by the Dutch. Eric Fona's American history textbook, Give Me Liberty, describes the massacre. Quote, the destruction of one of the region's most powerful Indian groups not only opened up the Connecticut River Valley to rapid white settlement, but also persuaded other Indians that the newcomers possessed power that could not be resisted. The colonists ferociously shot their Indian allies, who considered European military practices barbaric. A few Puritans agreed. Quote, it was a fearful sight to see them frying in the fire, the Pilgrim leader William Bradford wrote of the raid in Mystic. But to most Puritans, including Bradford, the defeat of the barbarous nation by the sword of the Lord offered further proof that they were on a sacred mission and that the Indians were unworthy of sharing New England with their New England. Later, trying to rally the Eastern tribes in a last-ditch attempt to stop the European destruction of their land and people, Tecumseh traveled throughout the Mississippi Valley in the 1760s, seeking a pan-Indian alliance. The alternative to resistance, he argued, was extermination. Quote, where today are the Pequot? He asked. Where are the Narragansett, the Mohican, the Poconet, and other powerful tribes of our people? They have vanished before the avarice and oppression of the white man, like snow before the summer sun. Indians, he proclaimed, must recognize that they are a single people and unite in claiming a common and equal right to the land. So reading Ghosh has given me a new perspective on American colonial history and the beginning of modern genocide and the ruthless exploitation of the planet that has led to our sad present state. Tisha B'Av was a traumatic moment in Jewish history when God abandoned his people and let nature take its course. That's it for this week. I will see you next week, and I'll be all cleaned up. I've been avoiding shaving now, but after Tisha B'Av, I will, as I say, I'll get cleaned up. So I'll see you next week. Have a good week, and Stay safe.